Yeah, but I'm in the house of God, so I'm not threatened by you today. You will not intimidate me in this holy space today. We get back to New York, you can go back to all the intimidation, but
He
today
said,
I
I fear no
feel
man in the
that's
house
right.
of God
That's right. I'm
or woman
what's
in
he
the house
what's
of
he
God.
tweeting? Yeah. Oh my
1 minute.
God. I'm not gonna open
Ten seconds.
mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us as always for Make It Plain. This is a very special edition of Make It Plain, though. God bless you. Good morning. Get ready for impeachment. We are live in Memphis, Tennessee, where we are observing 50 years since Dr. King's martyrdom. 50 years ago, this week, here in the city of Memphis, his life was taken from us at the young age of 39, too soon and all too tragic. On this day in particular, and we're not going to get into the significance of this day and where we are, this particular day, April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King spoke in the very place in which I sit now, and I want to express my thanks to the Church of God in Christ, and to Mason Temple in particular for their hospitality and getting us in. It is very early. We're an hour behind Central Time here in Memphis, so it is an hour behind our normal East Coast start time in New York. So it's actually earlier. It's 6 a.m. We've been here since 5 here, and they were kind enough to open the church for us and have us here. We were, as some of you probably heard me say, that we were planning to be at Lorraine Motel this morning. But weather and a couple of technical issues prevented that. We will, tomorrow morning when we go live, you will actually see us from the Lorraine Motel. We'll be right outside, and you'll see the balcony. You'll see the room that Dr. King stayed in, and what have you. But we wanted to be here today, and it's appropriate. It probably is somewhat providential that it worked out this way. We did not plan to be in Mason Temple at this time. We were going to be here a little later this morning. Providential in the sense is that Dr. King also did not plan to be at Mason Temple 50 years ago today. It was on this day, April 3rd, that he spoke here in the great Mason Temple, and he gave his mountaintop speech. And so, what is going to happen in terms of our programming today? We're going to be here at Mason Temple for quite some time this morning, because in a few hours you will hear and see some of the sanitation workers who Dr. King came here to support and to stand with and to be in solidarity with. You will see some of them, some of the original sanitation workers, several of them, I think 3 of them, are actually still working for the Memphis sanitation department. So we'll talk to some of them and get to hear from them. It's actually be a panel hosted by Danny Glover, and then I'll be able to talk to some of them myself, and you'll hear some of that. It was in 1968 that we that well, it was in 1968 that Dr. King and all of his lieutenants came here to support those sanitation workers. And again, it was here at Mason Temple where he gave the speech before the night he was assassinated. And we've all heard it. I've been to the mountaintop. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land. And if you're watching us on stream, and we invite all of you to join us. I didn't say that at first. We do it so often, we take for granted everyone knows when we're doing it. But if you have never looked at us live streaming, you want to do it today. Do not be discouraged to do it because, you've heard I'm funny looking. That's not important right now. What's important is that you see the inside of this sanctuary, this beautiful house, the historic Mason Temple. People come here every day, all hours of the day, to take tours of Mason Temple because this is where Dr. King, many believe, predicted and foresaw his own death. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, over the past few days, has talked about it at Mason Temple, that is, as being his Gethsemane, really, his Garden of Gethsemane, because he didn't want to come here. It was pouring down rain, as is the forecast today. That's one of the reasons we're not outside. It was pouring down rain 50 years ago. And he was ill. Dr. King was. He had a cold. And he didn't want to leave Lorraine Motel. He was already in it. The story, as the story goes, he was already in his pajamas. But this place was packed. The crowd wanted to hear him. Reverend Jackson and Ralph Abernathy came in his stead because he was sick. And when Reverend Jackson and Reverend Abernathy walked into Mason Temple, the crowd erupted, and Reverend Jackson turned to Reverend Abernathy and said, "Look, they're cheering." And Reverend Abernathy said, "Jesse, they're not cheering for us. They think Dr. King is walking in behind us." And he was not there. And the crowd began to chant his name. And so they called Dr. King and said, "You have to get over here." And he came and was only to give brief remarks, but ended up opening up and talking about the history of the movement and talking about the struggle here in Memphis, which, if you heard our opening hour this morning, a lot of the things that were going on in 1968 are still going on 50 years later. And we'll get into some of that today as well. But there's so much history here, and it's truly a very spiritual moment to be here. We're going to have even a few people stop by today, some of whom you recognize, some of whom you will be meeting for the first time. And we hope you will stay tuned. And again, join us Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Make it plain so you can see exactly where we are. And I believe over my left shoulder, you can see the pulpit. Is that right? Here at Mason Temple. And people come here from miles around and come to see this pulpit, come to see this famous church, and also its founder, the founder of the Church of God in Christ, Bishop Charles Mason, who is interred here in the temple. And we'll get a little bit into Bishop Mason and how he founded this church. And there's a bit of history in this church you may be surprised to learn is very relevant. Once again, things don't change. History repeats itself. Very relevant to something that is going on in our world today, and it has to do with gun violence. We'll talk about that. Dr. King himself, a victim of gun violence, is all we know, as we all know. Brittany's here. We're going to hear from her in a moment or two. I know many of you want to hear from her. But first, let me thank and introduce to you someone who's been kind enough to support us back. And when we go on these remotes, just so you know, technically speaking, we never know what can and cannot happen. If you all listen to our coverage of the March for Our Lives, the sometimes signals drop, things that you can't control. Today it's rain, everything you can't control. And so it's important when we have someone back in studio, when I'm out on location, in case there's any technical problem, to kind of cover. Sometimes I feel a little funny that way, because sometimes the people that we ask to cover are, some of them are more talented than I am and have a lot more to offer than just sitting in a chair in case I drop I drop off. And one of those people is there now, and I want to acknowledge her and bring her up, so you all can hear her voice. And we're thankful to have with us back in our New York studio, back in Rockefeller Center, Angelique Roche. She's no stranger to Sirius XM Progress, of course, but I think this is the first time Angelique has been on the air on Make It Plain, and therefore been up at the crack of dawn this early in the morning to be on there. Am I right about that, Angelique? Is this the first time you've been?
This is the first time.
Okay, well, welcome. How are you this morning, dear sister?
I'm lovely. The sun is coming up here in New York. It is not snowing. It is great.
I was surprised yesterday about the snow. I had no idea that the snow was even in the forecast. Did they predict that, or did it just sneak up on us?
I think it snuck up on most people, but some folks were like, "Oh, it's going to snow on Monday," and I'm like, "No. Why would it? It's the spring. Why would we get snow?"
Yeah, and opening day was snowed out, which I never. You could say rained out, snowed out. I don't know. But thank you, Angelique, for being there this morning. I don't know. Do you have us up on social media? Can you see where we are right now?
I can. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I encourage everybody to tune in on Facebook or Twitter. I have both open. It's amazing.
This is, no, it really, really is. And guess what, Sirius XM Progress audience, we pretty much have it all to ourselves. So this is just you and me and Angelique, and Brittany and Stephen and Layla and Andrea. That's weird. That's just us here. And let me also shout out Fusion Films, which is a family business. They're responsible for our streaming and our videography and documenting of this event. So thank you to them for being here. But no, it's just us here. And as you can see, other than security, there's not a soul in the building. But right there from that very pulpit, Dr. King gave his speech. I've been to the mountaintop. If you look at the old video, you'll see him stand up to speak and sit back down. Those were the chairs. They all were seated right there in that row of chairs. Tonight, the same thing will happen. Martin Luther King III, Bernice King. I'm not sure about Dexter. I think he may be here. Reverend Jackson, Andy Young, others, those who are the surviving apostles of Dr. King will be here to not necessarily recreate that night, but to reflect on and remember what was going on 50 years ago, this very night, in this very room, and in this very building. We all have seen that. We've seen him say that. And it always, to me, and I'm sure it was for you too, Angelique, I mean, when we saw that speech growing up, we weren't alive yet. But when we saw that as we were growing up, it always struck me as just amazing. It was as if he knew
Yeah.
what was going to happen. Didn't you get that feeling? Was that your reaction when you saw that?
It's amazing when you listen to the clips, but then when you listen to the entire speech and you really do hear this prophetic statement, but not even hearing the speech, but hearing what happened the next day. And how there's this moment where, as you said, he was sick the day before, but they say that he got this sudden burst of energy
Right.
and he became very playful. And it's almost that moment where in life where a person who knows they're going to die, they get this last burst of energy. And it's the whole couple of days, the fact that he left, I know you had an interview, and have been doing a lot of things in Memphis, and I'm sure this feeling has come through, in your talks with folks who were very close to him, is that he was getting to a point where he was getting revived and re-energized after a very tough, month, the month before when it came to the marches and, holding steadfast on being nonviolent and holding steadfast to his principles. But yeah, every time I hear the speech, and that certain part where he says, I've been to the mountaintop and I may not get there with you. I may not get to the promised land with you. Just in that statement, you just know in that moment he has come to terms, that his days may be coming to an end.
Yeah, yeah. I hope people had a chance last night to look at the HBO documentary, the new one. It premiered last night, MLK in the Wood. Did you
Yeah.
get to see that, Angelique?
I did. It's amazing.
The filmmaker, the director, Taylor Branch and Zernona Clayton, and one of the other producers, Trey Ellis, were in studio with us last week. And Andrew, I'm sorry I didn't give you a heads up on this, but at some point this morning, if you could ready that clip we pulled of Zernona Clayton, I want the audience to hear that clip specifically, Andrew, when we get time, but not right now. But if you can get it ready, when we talked, she said to us in studio, Zernona Clayton, for those you don't know, she was a member of his staff at SCLC. She worked very, very closely with him.
Yeah.
And those of you who didn't see that documentary, whatever you do, go on demand on HBO and take a look at it. But you see what he was going through, and you're absolutely right, Angelique. He was buoyed after being sick also because they were able to get the court to grant them a permit to march again in Memphis. And ladies and gentlemen, the challenge was to his very existential philosophy. I mean, he was practicing a nonviolent movement. And that wasn't just random either. He not only was that a very Christian approach. Dr. King had been to India. He had studied the teachings of Gandhi. That too wasn't random. A lot of times, I mean, and that's the history. We talk about the lack of our own history being taught in schools. Who knows the history of the freedom struggle in India? Where is that taught? But the fact of the matter is, people were committed to nonviolence in India. People were killed standing up in a nonviolent fashion in India, resisting British colonialism. And that's some important history to understand, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had a chance to look at it. So none of this just was by happenstance. And so what happened in Memphis at the march, the first march here, I believe it was March 28th, violence broke out. And Dr. King had to be spirited away. His safety was in jeopardy. And he felt challenged to come back and prove that a nonviolent march could occur in Memphis. Now, we should also acknowledge that the agenda at the time was to use that against Dr. King. So the mainstream media and his detractors were saying, he's not powerful anymore. He can't lead anymore. He can't make a difference anymore. He can no longer lead a nonviolent movement. And they personally attacked him, but also principally attacked the movement in that way to undermine it. He had already made plenty of enemies because he had come out against the Vietnam War. So coming back here to Memphis, as perilous as it was, because before we even get into the possibility of him being killed, they could not absolutely be sure that those who incited violence before would not do it again. So that in and of itself was a risk. So if he'd come to Memphis a second time, Angelique led another march that ended up the way the first march did, he would have been even more damaged politically and what have you. And frankly, you know, we amongst family. I mean, this is our show. I make no bones about it. You know, and we see this more and more. I do believe that the authorities had some provocateurs out there, because that's what they do. Oh. And we've seen it in our modern day movements. You know, people who show up and start trouble and cause trouble. And I believe that was the case 50 years ago. They're still doing it today. And we now know, years removed, the presence of COINTELPRO. We didn't, in 1968, people didn't know a lot about COINTELPRO. They knew that J. Edgar Hoover was surveilling Dr. King. But we don't think people knew the name for it yet. By March of 1968, J. Edgar Hoover had declared Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. the most dangerous man in America. He has said that the civil rights movement was the greatest threat to national security since the Civil War. And we know what the threat to national security, the Civil War, was, because that was the end of national security. The nation split in two. Yeah. And so when he came here to lead this march, everything was on the line. And it was very, very risky. Not to mention risky to the movement, not to mention obviously risky to his survival as a human being, risky to his life, and that's what he did. We're thankful all of you can join us. Angelique Roche is back in the studio with us. I'm going to get Brittany down here if she would join us, because I want you all to hear her perspective. One of the things that's good about this, and is to Angelique. I like to watch, because I've been here before. I like to watch and see the reactions others have when they're here for the first time. When I brought my children here, friends, co-workers, and what have you. So Brittany's here. Brittany was in Selma with us for the first time. It's been a month already. You know that? We went to Selma a month ago. This time just flies. Come have a seat, Brittany. She's
I won't be able to hear, but
yeah, and I'll relate, because she doesn't have IFB. So Brittany, as you all know, is normally very antagonistic toward me. But she has.
I couldn't imagine that, Mark.
She has been practicing the principles of King and nonviolence throughout our time here in Memphis. And it's been challenging, not just with me. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's, you know, Angelique, you do this. You know, logistics are a trip, especially for some of this size and magnitude, you know, and this doesn't happen. I mean, we're in Memphis, and this is probably the biggest thing to happen in Memphis since 1968, and the march that occurred after his funeral. So Brittany's here. Welcome, Brittany Temple.
thank you very much, Mark Thompson.
How are you finding your time here in Memphis so far?
It's been great. Do you want me to hold this? It's been moving and eye-opening and incredible. You know, like I told you when we went to Selma, and after it was over, you know, we were so busy while we were there, and then this feeling of awe washed over me when I thought back on all that we had done. And, you know, we marched over the bridge, and I'm kind of, you know, like yesterday was crazy, but I feel like I'm glad that Selma was so recently in the past, because I'm remembering to savor these little moments along the way. For example, I stood in front of the Lorraine Motel yesterday, also known as the National Civil Rights Museum, and it was crazy. There was people everywhere, and it for a moment it felt very like amusement parkish. You know, people are laughing, joking, talking. There's news cameras everywhere. People are all around. But I remembered somehow in the moment to take a moment and to think about where I'm standing and like really soak in the history. There are so many incredible people here too who have been speaking, and the panel that we aired in the first hour from yesterday, we're hearing so many incredible voices. So many great minds are joining here in this place. I feel incredibly honored to be here among all those people, and I can't believe that we're even sitting here where Dr. King gave his final speech before his assassination. It's incredible. The magnitude of that is enormous. You know, right behind us where we are sitting, he literally spoke such a moving, you know, impromptu speech, as you said. And I think that I was thinking about this yesterday and how people need to be here. They need to immerse themselves in these places and support these places. You know, even the history of the National Civil Rights Museum, they had a really hard time getting that off the ground and, you know, making it exist as what it is today. And it's beautiful and it's incredible and it's so rich with history. And I think that you can read it in the history book as many times as possible. You can read interpretations, analysis, get new tidbits of information along the way. But standing there, thinking about what happened, thinking about the moments, visualizing it is powerful and moving. And for me, it's, you know, we're only in day 2 of all these activities, and I feel so grateful. I feel just overwhelmed with so much history, and it's just rich here. It just feels rich.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And it is, you know, Brittany mentioned, Angelique, the National Civil Rights Museum, which is a very moving and historic pilgrimage to make. But I'll admit even that it's a bit strange and eerie, because you're going to a place where, to put it bluntly, he was killed.
Yeah.
And it's when you go to the room that he was in, room 306.
It's still there, right?
Yeah, it's still there. You know, they ask for silence and reverence once you're in that space. But it's still a very celebratory atmosphere, so you kind of struggle within yourself to be, you know, either casual or celebratory, or to be reverent and solemn. You end up usually, I mean, you see people you know, and you speak and you say hello, and it's very friendly. I was hugging and embracing people out there, but you inevitably, for some of the moments that you're at that space, you become very solemn, because it's a very human story. And, you know, I don't think any of us has gotten to the point where we're totally out of touch with our own humanity. It could have been any one of us. And we all are knowing now more than ever, because with all the gun violence that we're seeing, any one of us could have been or can be put in the same position that Dr. King was put in. And it's happening. It's happening all over the country. It's happening every day. I don't think there can be any doubt, if people want to debate, well, what would he have us do now? People can debate, well, he might want us to do this, or he might want us to do that. I think we can all unanimously agree that, looking down upon us, he would want us to do something about violence in general, but gun violence in particular.
Yeah. And I think that was really his legacy, is understanding the value of black and brown bodies. And what was really unique about his legacy is that it was across sectors, right? Like, he understood that civil rights and economic justice and social justice were all connected. And that's what brought him to Memphis in the first place, was understanding that the economic situation that was plaguing the sanitation workers was important, and it needed his support. Because that was his legacy. His legacy, in essence, was showing up, coalition building, and supporting the voices and recognizing the intersections that constituted social justice.
Right.
And so, you know, it's really interesting when you look back and you understand how far ahead of his time he was and how we are still fighting. Just as you just said, Mark, we are still fighting similar fights when it's coming to state-sanctioned violence.
Right, right. No, no, very, very well put. And, you know, I like what you said about him valuing and fighting for black and brown bodies. Literally, who cares about sanitation workers and garbage men and women? Who wakes up in the morning wondering, I wonder how my garbage and sanitation worker is doing today. I wonder if she or he is having a nice day. I wonder if if that person has enough money to feed her or his family. Who does that? We throw things away, and we don't think about where they go, who has to handle them. Yeah, I confess, years ago when I was living in D.C., and we had one of our organizations we were involved in the movement and needed money. And someone came to me with an idea. The city was contracting out garbage services and recyclable services to small groups and nonprofits. And some people were actually doing it to make money to keep their nonprofit organizations alive. So somebody came to me and said, well, you all ought to do this, Mark. And then I said, well, I've never picked up trash. I don't know if that's my thing. But we thought about it. Said, okay, you know, and I thought about the garbage workers here. But then this is what happened. Somebody else came to me and said, well, you don't want to do that. And I said, why not? It said there's a reason. And ultimately, they discontinued the program. We know more now than we knew then about waste. If we had done that, when you expose yourself to that line of work, you are exposing yourself to every illness and disease and toxicity imaginable.
Especially especially when you think about the fact that we hadn't even got to a point of understanding what the toxins are in that waste.
That's right. And so what happened was when I got that wake-up call, I had even more appreciation for what was going on here. And clearly we weren't qualified to deal with waste management. That's just not something we just all walk up. Come on, Angelique, let's go do waste management. That's just not something that you do. And we got that message loud and clear. But then I had an even greater appreciation for what was going on here, because back 50 years ago, the incident I'm talking about we were involved in was in the 90s. In 1968, remember now, folks, we know more about waste management we did in the 90s. We all weren't using blue and transparent bags in 1990, 91, 92, 93, 94. Come on, y'all, think about it.
Well, we weren't using bags at all.
That's right. We weren't recycling anything. So think of what we know today. And so as a result, we didn't take that contract. And then I said, well, what was going on in 1968 that they knew? And how were they able to protect themselves and stay healthy? And I'm sure they didn't. We don't know that. When we talk to some of them today, I plan to ask them that. But what literally happened back in those days, you rode in the back of the garbage truck. And there's video of that. You would sit in the back where the trash was compacted, which was a very, very dangerous thing to do. You did it mostly when it rained, like it's supposed to rain today. Literally 50 years ago on this day, April 3rd, it was pouring down rain in Memphis. Rain is predicted today. So two of those men did that. They would sit in the back of the garbage truck. And somehow or another, the switch was accidentally tripped, and they were captured in the compactor and killed. And
one of them wasn't even 30 yet.
Right, not even 30 years old. No, you're absolutely right. And so, just think about how life and what we experience is a game, can be a game of inches or seconds. As bad as it was here in Memphis, and I'm not saying Dr. King would not have eventually come, because they were in a fight anyway. Underpaid, mistreated, abused. But that took it to the extreme when those men were killed, Angelique. So if that had not happened, if they had not been killed, it would not have been the same urgency to come at the time Dr. King did. And the circumstances might have been very, very different. So you just never know. But he had the courage to do it, and as the documentary was showed last night revealed, people didn't agree with him coming here. It was just another thing to take on. But what he said in this very hallowed hall was what he had to consider, what would happen to them, the sanitation workers, and what would happen to him if he didn't stand with them. So we sing the song in church, His Eyes on the Sparrow. I know he watches me, just on a lowly sparrow. The sanitation workers were Dr. King's sparrows because nobody was thinking about them. And so if he thought about them, certainly Dr. King thought about all of us. And that's why he gave his life. So, folks, we're here at Mason Temple. We're going to get ready to take a quick break. We'll still be streaming, though. We're going to be streaming all morning. We've got guests joining us now and throughout the morning. At around 8:30, 9:30 Eastern Time, behind me, the panel will assemble of the sanitation workers. And then we're going to talk to some of them one-on-one after the panel. So we'll be on the air with you from now until, I think, about 12 or 1 Eastern.
12 Eastern.
12 Eastern. Okay.
12 Eastern.
All right. So she knows. She's produced. She keeps up with the clock. And my time is all messed up, Angelique. I don't know whether it's Central Time, Eastern. I woke up this morning trying to do math, looking at my clock, trying to figure out what time it was. So,
It's too early for all that, Mark.
Yeah,
It's too early to do math.
Yeah, just do that. And I didn't do well at it either. So I didn't succeed. And then
It's hard on me about my math.
yeah, I didn't do well this morning.
So.
I was kind of like you with the math this morning because I know you can't do it at all. But then later tonight, the mountaintop commemoration will be here live. So you want to tune in for that. A very, very historic time. Brittany's here. Angelique's back in studio. Two very, very special guests are going to join us when we come back from break. Two great men of God. We are in the Church of God in Christ, Mason Temple. And again, as the morning goes on, to give you a little bit of the history about this place and Bishop Mason and what it and what that all of that means. Streaming now, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Make it plain. We'll be back. We're live in Memphis, folks. Sirius XM Progress 127, Resistance Radio. Get woke. Get ready for impeachment. From Memphis, this is MIP. Gentlemen, come on down. Sorry about that. That was a last minute change we had to make. And I just told y'all to just come on down. And y'all were probably the only ones that actually came on down. Come on, have a seat. Have a seat. Give me your full name.
Andre Johnson. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, man. Thanks for the invitation.
You're here in Memphis?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We need to move around anything, or they need to get closer to me, or got to get, okay. Good.
So you just want me during the break, just keep the camera here?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, just keep it in the road.
Now we're not streaming the
I can't like speak until I've
the
had
8:30 thing, right?
Not if we can't. I guess not.
Well, I mean, we got the 10. I mean,
Yeah, no,
we
you
can film
gotta
it.
go to the thing, yeah.
I got to do the thing with Dr. Barber at 10.
Right. And
But then we can come back.
you come back, right? Because we need to get the individual. Right. Okay, we'll work it out.
You know, Terry's running the civil rights museum.
It was very fun. It was very entertaining.
Terry's president. So I'm running between those two cities, Boston and Baltimore.
No, I didn't know that.
And he, let me get this quick pic right.
Okay.
Do that out here.
Feels amazing.
Let me have that too. All right. Oh, you
Test.
She got here in November 14th. So I've been back and forth between Maryland and Memphis.
Back in 1 minute.
Okay. For those of you watching on stream, we're 1 minute out. Really? I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. So that's why you're here. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What years were you at Howard as dean?
I was there 96 to 07. Yeah, director Pastor Flip. 96 to 07.
I've been having some uprisings on
Yeah,
the campus.
I think they still are. They still occupying the area.
They messing with the money.
Yeah, I got some friends that graduated.
10 seconds.
Like, oh man.
Probably got 30 seconds left.
Okay, 10 seconds,
Is Andrew
everybody.
counting me down?
All right. Huh?
Is Andrew counting me down?
Yeah.
Okay, how much time we got left?
We should be on now. You just said 10 seconds.
Mix up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sirius XM Progress. Just to kind of set the tone, some of the music that you're hearing on our beds is music indigenous to Memphis. Stax Records is here in Memphis. Stax was sort of the competitor or alternative label to Motown. And so this is music that was written and produced and recorded right here in Memphis. There's a wonderful Stax Record Museum here in Memphis. And these were some of their hits even from 50 years ago in 1968. Now, it wasn't on Stax Records, but does anybody know the number one song that first week of April on the R&B charts? That's a little, I'm going to put that out there for y'all. This is a trivia question. 866-99 series. Call and tell us if you know what was the number one song that first week in April in the country. Folks, we're here at Mason Temple Church of God in Christ. Been joined here, as you can see, if you're watching us on our stream, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, been joined here by two great men of God, one from right here in Memphis, one half in Memphis. I guess that's the best way to say it. And we were talking just about being in a museum, and we ran into each other at the museum, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. And just glad that they're here and came out early this morning. We were, as I said, we were going to be at the Lorraine. There was some technical issues, and it was supposed to rain. Is it raining outside yet? Did it start raining?
Not quite yet.
Okay. But that's coming, and we would have got all wet. So we said we'll be inside today. We'll be at the Lorraine in the morning, the National Civil Rights Museum. And I want to talk about that too. Is it appropriate to call it the Lorraine or National Civil Rights Museum or both or whatever? But here's my brother seated to my right. I'm going to introduce him first. He and I have known each other for years. He's known me, well over 20 years. He met me over 20 years ago when I was born, because I'm just 20. And so he's known me since I was an infant. We met. He was the dean of chapel at my alma mater, my graduate alma mater, Howard University. Well, more than I was born at Howard University on the campus, but got to know him well. He was very, very close to my pastor, the man who ordained me, the Reverend Dr. Morris L. Sharon, who was a part of this show and a part of both of our lives. We last saw each other at his homegoing. But without further ado, the Reverend Dr. Boyer Freeman, who is pastoring in Baltimore. And I'm going to let him tell you. I'm going to have him introduce Reverend Johnson here, but I'm going to let him tell you, why he's in Memphis so much these days. How are you, brother?
Good to be with you, Mark.
God bless you. Thank you for coming by here this early in the morning.
Doing well, man. It's my joy. Yeah, I'm finding myself now between Maryland and Memphis, splitting my time. My wife, Terry Lee Freeman, is president of the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel.
Is that how the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel?
Lorraine Motel. So she took this opportunity in 2014. Of course, I've been pastoring the New St. Mark Baptist Church for the last 19 years in Baltimore, Maryland. And so I'm splitting my time between the two cities as the opportunities are in both places.
She's been there since 2014. How's she finding it?
Extraordinary opportunity. She's doing extraordinarily well with a fantastic team that has brought us to this particular moment, MLK 50, that's been in the planning for the past 2 years.
I want to get more into that. But first, though, introduce us to this young man to my left.
This is my friend and brother, Dr. Andre Johnson, a great pastor here in the city of Memphis and a professor at the University of Memphis in rhetoric. He is a rhetorician, and Pastor Johnson can say it and get it done.
Pastor Johnson, welcome. How are you, man?
First of all, it's an honor to be here, and I will give you that honorarium for that great introduction a little bit later. No, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It is just awesome to be alive at this time, MLK 50. And I just want to say something about Sister Terry Freeman. We are just so honored and pleased to have her at the helm of the National Civil Rights Museum in such a time as this. I could not think of any better person to, like I said, 2 years in the making, and to pull all of this off. I think she's doing a terrific job. A whole lot of Memphians think that she's doing an excellent job. And I just want to say kudos to Terry Freeman and her staff at the National Civil Rights Museum. They are doing one heck of a job.
Well, and I concur. When you all see the program tomorrow and hear us in the morning, what you just described would be reflected, because we've had an incredible experience with the whole staff and getting everything organized and put in place. For us to even be there, we saw a lot coming together yesterday, just very warm. And really, that entire staff that we've encountered, Connie Dyson, Henry Fields, I was messing with them last night, because a lot of other places in Memphis, because this is the biggest thing Memphis has seen, as I was saying, everybody's running around pulling their hair out because it's overwhelming. But the museum staff was just so calm and steady, and really acting in the spirit of Dr. King, I thought. So I was actually commending them for that last night, and please commend your better half for that as well, and congratulate her.
That's encouraging. I'll make sure
Please,
Terry gets that word, man.
Yeah. And so she got there in 2014. So I just want to go back over a little bit of history. The museum opened, then it closed again to be renovated into the space that exists now. And then it reopened again the second. What was the year that it reopened after the renovation? Do you?
Well, the renovation was complete in 13.
That's right.
13.
Right.
So reopened at that time. Going back to 91, when the museum was really organized and developed, Beverly Robertson was the initial president of the museum and was very instrumental in raising the profile of the museum and giving it its prominence. And so after the renovation, a $30 million renovation, Terry was invited to come in and serve as president. Of course, prior to being president of the museum, she was president of the Community Foundation in Washington, D.C. for 18 years. And so there are plans and hopes to continue an expansion, because the campus has broadened into what is called the Legacy Building, where the alleged shooter was located at the time of the assassination. And so to do some new programming and capital improvements to that area as well.
And it is there, folks. If you go, you see the rooming house across the street, where the alleged shooter fired the shot that killed Dr. King. Now, Reverend Johnson, you teach rhetoric. So for those who don't know, what's a class in rhetoric? Like, what is a rhetoric? Now, are you teaching in a theological capacity, or in rhetoric in general?
Well, actually, both. I am here are my titles. Okay, I am a professor of communication at the University of Memphis, but I also hold the Henry Logan Starks Fellow for the Institute of Race, Faith, and Social Justice at Memphis Theological Seminary. So what I do is I study. When people ask me, I study rhetoric, race, and religion broadly. So what that means is I try to get people to understand what they are talking about when they invoke the sacred in any kind of capacity, whether it's public or private. So what a class will look like, I teach class courses in African American public address, interracial communication. I'm teaching a King course now, which I have been teaching now for 18 months. I have been so thoroughly enmeshed in each semester. I've taught a King course. So anticipating leading up to MLK 50. I want to write about that, actually, that whole process of me rediscovering King, rediscovering the text, and rediscovering his legacy, and the students and their responses when they read for the first time, for a lot of them, especially my undergraduates, but also my students at the Memphis Theological Seminary. They have heard of King, of course. I Have a Dream and a couple of more other speeches, but to really just go deep into the King corpus, is just to see King in a brand new way. And if you're not careful, that King can get you fired up. You can become radical, right? So so those type of experiences, those are the type of classes I teach. I am also 19th century African American religion and church scholar as well. I study Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. That's my guy, collecting his writings, and with the Henry McNeil Turner Project that is up right now. People can go and check that out and look at some of the speeches of an earlier person who thought Black Lives Matter in the 19th century as well.
No, that's what's the title of the King course?
Oh, this King course is the rhetoric of Martin Luther King Jr. and at the seminary it is called the Beloved Community, the prophetic rhetoric of Martin Luther King Jr.
Outstanding. So we have a King scholar here.
Mark, not only is he involved in the classroom and academically, but after we ran into you yesterday, Dr. Johnson had gotten a call from one of his parishioners to tell him about an action that was taking place in the community, in the streets. And so he has his feet on the ground. And so we ended up in North Memphis after we saw you at the site where a young man by the name of Dorian Hunter, I believe his name is, 17 years old, lived in North Memphis in a neighborhood called Springdale, went into a local convenience store and allegedly had taken a sweet tea, a can of sweet tea. All right, a Trayvon Martin situation all over again from the store. The shopkeeper pursued him outside of the store, caught up with him in the backyard of an abandoned house, and he was shot point blank in the back and left him there in that backyard without contacting the police or anybody else until 2 days later, the neighbors smelled his body and found him in that backyard. And so now the community is uprising and responding to the fact that this shop has remained open for these days while this young man was literally down the street, dead after this action. This was on Thursday. And so the action that took place last night was that, the community, young people, preachers, pastors, people were very involved in planning the actions that need to take place. And so the advantage that I have now being Maryland is Memphis, Baltimore is Birmingham, Cincinnati is Chicago. The same thing is taking place all over America.
Hold that thought. We've got to take a quick break on the radio. Folks, stay tuned. Our stream will still be going, and then we'll come back in a few moments. Sirius 6 in Progress 127, Memphis, live from Memphis for MLK 50. This is MIP. While we on the break, bring my mic down. And sometimes when we're on the stream, people see us talking and they don't hear anything, they panic.
Okay.
So if you want to focus on something else, just focus on the podium while we talk for a minute.
Man.
We got a few minutes on this break. So wait a minute, this happened when?
There's the situation. Here's
Folks, we are live at Mason Temple. Angelique Roche back in studio. We appreciate her being there. But we're live at Mason Temple 50 years ago tonight in this very space. Dr. King gave his mountaintop speech. The Reverend Dr. Boyer Freeman is here seated to my immediate right, the pastor of New St. Mark in Baltimore, and the husband of Terry Lynn Freeman, who is the president of the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel. We're going to hear more about that. To my far left is Reverend Dr. Andre Johnson, professor at the University of Memphis, most known, I think, right now because Penny Hardaway's back there coaching. He came to, that's what y'all know most about Memphis. But he actually teaches there and teaches a class on Dr.
Fix all the potholes too.
He's gonna do all of it. So he's here this morning, and we've been joined by our regular every Tuesday guest who spoke last night at Temple of Deliverance Church and God in Christ, founded by Bishop G. Patterson here in Memphis. Dr. Derek Johnson, the president CEO of the NAACP. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How you doing, Mark?
I'm fine. And Derek is it was saying and if he'd known he would have worn a shirt and tie, but Derek works out every morning. Normally when he's on the air with us at 6:30 Eastern, he's coming from the gym on his way to the gym. So I told him he's fine. He looks like a millennial.
Well, you know, looking. I am a millennial.
That's right. Well, and so we're talking, Derek. Derek, I first of all, I want you to hear this news that is breaking, that they're bringing us a young man shot by a store owner in North Memphis. Correct. What was the young man's name again?
Dorian Hunter, I believe his name is. Harris. Dorian Harris, 17 years old, in the Springdale neighborhood of North Memphis.
He was accused of stealing a sweet tea from the store, Derek.
Wow.
One of the people worked in the shop, shot him, right, Andre? Mm-hmm. And in the back, left him for dead outside the store, just left him there for 2 days. And then the neighbors smelled the stench.
Right. He was pursued, and this is the story now. Shot in the back. And then, instead of calling the police or saying that, hey, maybe you need to go in that abandoned house or whatever, left the body out there for 2 days. This happened, I think, Thursday. We didn't find the body until Saturday. And it was only because that people started smelling something funny. And people went in there and looked and found, hey, there's Dorian in here. And the community over there, the family, you can only imagine, distraught, community, outraged. And this morning at 8 o'clock, we're going to stand with the family, bear witness with them as they stand out on the street corner at Springdale and Howell, right at the corner where I think it's called the Top Hat store or something. That is, we're going to stand outside of there and just, bear witness to this atrocity that has happened.
The person who shot him is in custody now, is that right?
That's correct. The police have him in custody, and he's being charged. But the family wants that shop closed, as it should be, because of the egregious actions that have taken place right there.
So in light of Stephen Clark, I also just want to lift up a sister who we've not lifted up enough out in Elgin, Illinois, to Cynthia Clements, who was killed by the police in Elgin. This is not a police situation. It's closer to a Zimmerman situation because this is a civilian. We should also mention, Derek, it's complicated by the fact Reverend Freeman, Reverend Johnson tell me that the shooter and the owner, we're going to find out if that's real, the owner, is Ethiopian. So, early in the morning, President of NAACP, but this is what you do. This is your job. I mean, you have to contemplate these things. And, as we talk about Dr. King, in our movement and our struggle, oftentimes this is what we have to do, and this is the weight of the world.
But, when you look at the Parkland shooting and the reaction from the general public, you can clearly understand. But it's not an incident that's any greater than the ongoing systematic shooting of African Americans across the country. Gun violence is a problem. Australia looked at what was taking place in their country. In 1996, they were able to address it immediately, and since that time, Australia has not had the level of gun violence that we've had because they changed the public policy. They did so when they had the public will. Right now, our public will, unfortunately, is for a change of public policy, but there is a gun lobby that's so strong that individuals are afraid to respond to the needs and interests of the community. And the community is black, white, male, female, young, and old, because the use of guns in this country has completely paralyzed too many neighborhoods, too many children, too many individuals.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's appropriate, too, to have this conversation in light of Dr. King being a victim of gun violence. Reverend Johnson, it was asking you a little bit if you knew how much of the history you knew of Bishop Mason. I was reading earlier, Boyer and Derek, that when he was forming this congregation and this movement, the Pentecostal movement, Church of God in Christ, they had one of those big tent revivals like they did in the old days. Mm-hmm. And somebody went crazy, came out to the tent revival and shot it up. Mm-hmm. And it was considered one of the miracles that no one was killed. I think a couple people might have been scraped, but no one was killed. So, and they saw that as a sign to go forward. So, here again, the very place in which we sit has a history of dealing with gun violence itself.
The Church of God of Christ, Church of Christ Holiness came out of the Baptist church, and they went to a conference and came back, and they felt that they had a movement. The movement of people, in many ways, can be seen as a threat to others. Yeah. For African Americans, the religious institutions, whether it's AME, AMEZ, the Baptist Church, we've all had bouts with violence because people didn't understand the movement of God's people. But when everything is said and done through faith and work, we achieve.
Tell us a little bit, if you would, and you talked about a little bit in your speech last night at Temple of Deliverance, the relationship between Dr. King and the NAACP.
Absolutely. Dr. King was elected to be a pastor of a Baptist church in Montgomery. But the movement in Montgomery had been going on. In fact, Rosa Parks, who was the secretary of the NAACP at the Montgomery County branch, was sent out to investigate cases. E.D. Nixon was a strategist in that community. He was the branch president. He was a Pullman porter. He and A. Philip Randolph was in constant contact around strategies that was needed to break down the walls of segregation. Ruby Hurley was our regional director. Our office was in Alabama. It was only until the movement got to going good that Alabama barred NAACP out of the state of Alabama barred NAACP. Ruby Hurley had to be taken out of the state in a trunk because had she been found, she was going to be arrested. So King's existence when he got to Montgomery was not around civil rights. He happened to be the newest face and the best speaker in the room at the time because Vernon Johns, who he replaced, had to leave the city. And as a result of that, we know ML King as we do today.
How do you feel, Derek? Because it did come up a little bit last night for some of the other speakers. At different points along the way, there was a little bit of tension between Roy Wilkins and Dr. King. How do you process that in your role now as president of NAACP? I mean, it doesn't matter now in the real sense. I mean, everything has moved forward. But that is a little bit of the history there, as is natural between human beings and a little bit of, elbowing between groups. As you hear some of that history, how do you process it and how does it apply, if any way? No.
It's the natural way that civil rights and social justice is done. We have to have sharp elbows. There was tension between Roy Wilkins and Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall and Malcolm X. Malcolm X and ML King, Marcus Garvey and A. Philip Randolph and Floyd McKissick. It's just the natural process of what takes place. There's tension among leaders now. Social justice is not a popularity contest, and there's no one individual or group who have the right way. It takes that gumbo of all of us to make a movement come to life to support the people that we represent.
We ain't got no tension, though, right? We good, right?
Well, hey, some days.
Especially since I'd acknowledge you as a millennial, right? Folks, we're live here at Mason Temple. Man of God, What are you feeling right now being in this space in Mason Temple where Dr. King gave his last sermon?
It's a Kairos moment as we look at MLK 50, to be in this sacred space where 50 years ago, Dr. King gave that significant speech the night before he made his transition. And so it's a blessing and an honor to be here in Memphis and to be here in this context, as my wife is serving as president of the National Civil Rights Museum, and there's an extraordinary team of people with the museum and in this community, such as Dr. Johnson, that continue the good fight 50 years later. Then on the other side, there's just the struggle and the wonderment that 50 years later, we are still in many instances in the same place we were 50 years ago.
Dr. Johnson, at this moment, being here in this edifice, where Bishop Mason himself is interred. I mean, tell us about what you're feeling right now from a spiritual point of view.
I'm excited, and let me tell you why. I am excited because this could be, Mark, an opportunity for Memphis to really bounce back. This is the moment that we have all of the material in front of us. One of my colleagues at the University of Memphis, Dr. Elena De La Vega, did the 2017 poverty study for MLK 50, and she presented it at Civil Rights Museum not too long ago. And we saw in that study where much has not changed here in the city as it relates to poverty. And she was talking about how she talked about and showed in her study how African Americans, for instance, have done what people want them to do, like go to school, get an education, because that's the way out of poverty. That's the narrative that we share with people. But that has not worked for African Americans here in the city of Memphis, where education has increased, wages and jobs have decreased, and more poverty. We have the number one childhood poverty in the nation at 48%. 52% of that is African American children. We have low wage jobs here. Just only a month and a half ago that the Chamber of Commerce have taken out of their off of their website one of the selling points businesses to come to Memphis. We have low wages. That was on the website to advertise to, get businesses to come here. But what MLK 50 is doing is exposing all of this for everybody to see. Everybody. You can't go anywhere without somebody saying that and talking a little bit about that. At the Civil Rights Museum, at all these University of Memphis, at all of these spaces and places, we have an opportunity now, Mark, to really take that data, take that information, to work with grassroots activists, which I am proud to say I'm part of, and to really build a new Memphis. Yeah. This can happen on the back end of MLK 50. When April 5th shows up, when everybody's gone, we have work to do in this city, and we can do it. We have the material. It is just now, do we have the will?
Derek Johnson, also president, CEO of the NAACP. Poverty in 1968, poverty rate was 13%. Is now 12.7. Same percentage, but of course, millions more in poverty, more likely for African Americans. Derek, for every dollar of wealth that a white family has, a black family has one dime. Median income is low. What is the NAACP doing right now? And in doing that, how is the NAACP inspired by Dr. King to try to do something about improving our condition, seeing how it has not changed much over the past 50 years?
Well, this is also the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Report. And the Kerner Commission's report said that we were moving towards two societies separate and unequal for African Americans during that time as now. We knew that. The report didn't tell us anything different. But in that report, it also said that these societies were being created by white institutions and structural racism. They didn't use the word structural racism, but in that paragraph, that's what they're saying. The NAACP, we've always understood race is economics. People were brought here to be exploited for free labor, slavery, and then exposed to cheap labor, segregation. Memphis is a hub for the cotton industry. It is a port city for the Mississippi and Arkansas Delta to bring the goods to town. The South succeeded from the Union for around the question of free labor because they want to control the economics and maintain an agricultural-based economy. This is not about race. It's about money. Race is a tool to keep people in power, and they do it in the way in which they use working poor whites to think that they have some type of race superiority over blacks so they can maintain a cheap white labor force. Look at West Virginia. Look at Kentucky. In fact, if you look at Oklahoma and Kansas right now, they are raping working poor whites by taking away access to education, going from a 5-day school week to a 4-day school week so that rich folks can get tax breaks. So it's a complex issue. For NAACP, we understand that it's about power, not policy, and we have to leverage our power because democracy is dependent on voting, and voting is our currency.
Yeah. Text NAACP to 40649, right?
46409. 46409.
And folks, and take the pledge to vote. How about you? How does it feel for you to be in this historic sacred space?
It is both a blessing and opportunity, but a reality check that say, yes, we are 50 years down the road. But Dr. King, when he spoke in 1963, he talked about it was 100 years prior to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was looking backwards, so freedom is a constant struggle. And as long as our skin tone don't change and people see us as readily identifiable sources of cheap labor, it doesn't matter how much education we receive, what degrees we have, or what profession that we practice in, until we change the power dynamic, the policy reality is going to remain the same. And the policy reality is how to control the tax policy and keep maintain domination control over a readily available source of cheap labor. And when you can't find anywhere for the labor, you create warehouses we call prisons to put people in until you find another use for them.
We should also get an update, too. NAACP has filed suit against the Trump administration.
4 times now.
Yeah, okay, count them. The most recent one is over the census. Where are we on that?
Well, the lawsuit was filed last week. In the development of the Constitution, it was the debate around how to count slaves, and they agreed upon 3/5 a person for the appropriation of federal funds through the census count. Today, we're still dealing with the question of a persistent undercount and what they say is hard to count areas, but as Black and Latino areas where when you equate it, it really is still counting blacks 3/5 a person. Prince George County, high wealth county, the highest wealth county for African Americans, the home of the census headquarters, and yet it had the highest undercount in the nation. How can you in your backyard, why it's so hard to find individuals who are middle income and upper income blacks and you can't count them? Why? Because it's a majority black county, and an accurate count means more federal appropriations to maintain quality roads, bridges, quality education. So this is a game of power, not policy, and we have to deal with power in a sense where democracy allows us, and that's about leveraging our votes. Yeah. Our vote is our currency.
The lawsuit over the repeal of DACA, where are we on your particular lawsuit that you filed?
It's still moving forward. We have the DACA lawsuit, the TPS lawsuit, the census lawsuit. So, we're in a litigious position right now, but movements oftentimes take different terms and junctures. And sometimes it's about hitting the streets, sometimes it's about filing the lawsuit, sometimes it's about going to the polls. All the time it's about people being active and advocating for the needs and interests that they must have in order to be productive citizens, but most importantly, be seen as quality human beings who are entitled to the God-given right to be respected.
Indeed. Speaking of Dr. Preacher, he said on Easter Sunday, he says DACA is dead. That's what he said. That's what Trump said. On Easter Sunday, on his way into church, they put a microphone in front of him, going into church, and said, Doc is dead. At the very moment, we're going to celebrate somebody rising from the dead.
Resurrection.
You know, you think about it. It's all a distraction. That was the first time he's been out in public. First time out in public with his wife after the issues with the two women that he's been dealing with, the porn star and the prostitute. Here's the presidents that dealing with a porn and a prostitute. So, of course, he got to do something to distract the media's attention. Unfortunately, too many of us in the media, we follow that foolishness as opposed to expose him for who he is more consistently without getting caught up in a distraction. He's a president of distractions. The Republican Party has allowed him to distract us so much, but their benefit was a tax policy to benefit the 1% richest in this country, while he at the same time demeaned the office of the presidency and embarrassed his nation.
Derek Johnson, President CEO, folks, Reverend Dr. Boyer Freeman, pastor of New St. Mark in Baltimore, the Pastor Andre Johnson, professor at University of Memphis, and pastor at Greater Life. Is that?
Gifts of Life.
Gifts of Life. I'm sorry. The G Life. So the brothers on my extreme end, they are headed to North Memphis to be with those who are demonstrating on behalf of Dorian Harris, who was gunned down by a shop owner there. They want that shop closed. You all keep us posted about that. Absolutely. And they're actually going to come back in the morning when we're at the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel to tell us more about that and what happens today. And we have an NAACP branch up in North Memphis, or is Memphis branch covered the whole thing? Okay, so Memphis branch up in there covered the whole thing.
It's the second largest branch in the country, and they're active. They're active.
So we bring all this together today. At around in the next hour and a half or so, sanitation workers will be here. We'll also be back here tonight for the Mountaintop program. 50 years since the Mountaintop speech. You'll be back here tonight, I'm sure.
I will be here.
NAACP and Derek here all week. I want to thank all of you for being here. And thank you for coming by and joining me in this historic space as we commemorate Dr. King's life and work. Just as a closing, where we were talking about it before you came in, it's an interesting feeling when you're at the museum because we all greet each other and we're social and we're be in a happy mood, but then you kind of go back and forth between happiness and sadness and solemnity, don't you? And I was arguing myself yesterday. Well, what headspace should I be in?
It's actually a sacred space. Yeah. And while it tells the story of our history here in America, and then culminates at the end of the tour with the room where Dr. King stepped out in his last moments of life, it just grounds you in terms of the reality of what has taken place, and also challenges us to now propel ourselves into a future that is stronger, brighter, more equitable, and fair for all of America. And so while we enjoy this space and are excited about the folks who are around, it helps to challenge us that there's much more for us to do.
Now, I know out of the four of us, am I the only one that was born 50 years ago? I was almost 2 years old when he passed away. Were any of you all born yet?
I was not born.
You were not born yet?
I was not born.
I was wee.
Were you here yet, boy?
Well, I wasn't quite a millennial at that time. I was 7 years old.
You were 7. Do you remember that?
I do remember vividly sitting in our living room, and there was a lot of commotion that was taking place. And I remember my mother and my father crying and understanding that something very important had happened in the world, and they wanted to make sure that I was okay. And then later on, understanding what that event was on April 4th of 1968.
Wow. Thank you all, Reverend Boyer Freeman, Reverend Andre Johnson, President NAACP, Derek Johnson. Text NAACP to 46049. I got it right.
46409.
46. I get it right. I'm sorry, y'all.
Tiffany gonna get it straight.
I know Tiffany gonna get us all straight. That's why she's here. 46409. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here, and you'll be seeing and hearing more from them. Tomorrow, Derek Johnson will be here tonight. We'll be broadcasting live the Mountaintop program. We'll take a quick break. We'll come right back here. We're here at historic Mason Temple Church of God in Christ, where Dr. King gave his famous Mountaintop speech. So stay tuned. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be joined. You all have heard Derek and I talk about this dynamic young lady. We're going to see and hear her next. She's going to fire us all up, as she always does. She's the new youth and college director at NAACP. Good job. Couldn't have picked a better one. And as this next generation comes up behind us and gets done what needs to get done. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned. We're streaming SiriusXM Progress. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Make it plain. Live from Memphis, SiriusXM Progress 127. Get woke. Get ready for impeachment. This is MIP.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, brothers. Appreciate it. Thank you, man. I'll see you later. Okay.
All right.
Okay, yeah. And let's do that. Folks, we're here live at Mason Temple, admiring the saints, and it's something to behold. Um, we're here. We're going to introduce our very special guest in just a moment. We got to go back to the studio for just a second or two. We do have to pay some bills around here. Angelique Roche is in our studio in Rockefeller Center, New York. Angelique, how you doing? Fine. I hope we're doing a good job for you down here in Memphis. Thank you.
Wherever you travel. From Fortune 1000 companies to mom and pop shops, Dish Business has the best entertainment for you. Open your doors to new customers and new opportunities with customizable programming packages and game-changing technology like the Dish Smart Box. Only Dish has the amazing value and technology to support your business. From bars and restaurants to hotels and hospitals, Dish has a solution for you. Dish's award-winning technology is scalable, manageable, and affordable, and Dish will work with you to find the perfect solution for your specific needs. Learn more about Dish for your business at dish.com/business.
Thank you, Angelique. I appreciate that, folks. We are live here at Mason Temple. People are already starting to come in because there's going to be a big panel in about an hour or so. The sanitation workers who were involved with Dr. King 50 years ago, some of them are still working for the Department of Sanitation, believe it or not. You all have heard us, Derek and myself, who joins us every Tuesday morning faithfully here on Make It Plain, since from the whole time he was even interim president of the NAACP up to being fully installed. And the past 2 or 3 weeks we've been talking about the new youth and college director, who is a firebrand, to say the very least. Very, very proud of this sister. And again, couldn't have picked a better person. Tiffany Dina Lofton is here. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fantastic. How are you?
Fine. Thank you for coming out early in the morning.
Not a problem. I'm used to it.
You got you have something going on with the youth this morning, right?
Yeah, we do. So at 10 a.m. we're doing a youth town hall panel. Angela Rye will be moderating. Right. And we're talking about how we connect issues to the ballot box, how we make sure we exercise our right to vote, and not only register people, but make sure people turn out for issues and not just candidates.
What made you want to do this, to take this job and take on this important position?
That's a great question. I see my life so far intersecting in two ways. One, I'm very proud of my blackness. I love my community. I knew wherever I worked, I wanted to continue to do racial justice work for my community, work for black folks all across the country. And as you know, the last 6 years I worked in the labor movement. Right. I understood in college the power of people and the responsibility that folks take when they work in organizations that are membership-based. And my first job outside of college was actually for a national student organization. It's called the United States Student Association. You know, I was president there. And it's an elected position. So I am accountable to the people who run the organization, to the students who run the organization. And continuing in that spirit, I said, you know, if I had to pick another place to go, if I had to figure out what my role is in this moment of catastrophe that's happening in the country, where can I serve the best? And the Youth and College Division at the NAACP was the perfect spot.
So when we talk about youth today, Tiffany, and refresh my memory, where'd you go to college? Where'd you graduate?
University of California, Santa Cruz.
All right, wonderful.
Go Bananas, folks.
Is California home? Is that where you?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that's great. I love Los Angeles. When we talk about young people today, generationally, just so we're clear, we talk about millennials, but in terms of your purview, you're also dealing with the next generation. Right. And is that Generation Z? Is that what we call it?
Good question. So the way that good question, is that Generation Z? Yesterday I had folks asking me, what exactly is a millennial? So
and by the way, we're also a little confused because your president, it says he's a millennial. So we just need to.
My pastor says that too.
We need clarity on all that.
Every time his birthday rolls around, the age goes up. So it feels like we have to figure that out. We have our youth and college division. It includes our high school students, our middle school students, and our college students. When we say next gen at the NAACP, it's folks who are in between the age of 25 and 35. Those folks who are transitioning. That's the next generation of folks who are transitioning into leadership positions. Okay. So that's how we define it at the organization.
I see. But are the kids in high school today, though, are they still considered millennials, or do they fall under another category? Do we know? I mean, not just for the NAACP, just in general.
In general, they're young people. They're young people. Yeah, they're young people. The millennials are the folks who were born in a certain era, right? And so the young people that are here now that were born in the 2000s, they're probably not millennials. We just call those young folks. They'll identify what their term is when they get my age. And I'm 28. Okay. So millennials are the folks who are high school, college, and the folks who are transitioning on to leadership.
Do the young people who are transitioning in leadership between those ages, 25 and 35, do they get Dr. King? Is there a full appreciation, or is there still more of a curiosity, or is there a distance there? What is that like?
They get it. The where the gap is that we didn't learn the truth in our school. Not completely. We didn't learn about the folks who helped Dr. King. We didn't learn about the folks who were in the background, women, black women who were doing the work. We didn't learn about Bayard Rustin until much, much later, and really on our own. And I actually learned about it reading the memoir of Congressman John Lewis, Walking with the Wind. And through that work and through reading that book, I said, oh, there's a lot of information in here that I wasn't told in school or that we didn't get in our history book. And so they get Dr. King, and it's in a more radical, strong, passionate attachment that I think we haven't seen in a long time. And coming up on 50 years, I mean, it's incredible. It's a huge commemoration for what this moment and what this mark means, not only for what happened 50 years ago, but for where we are 50 years from then, right? But that thinking about how we connect to Dr. King in that way, our folks get it. Our young folks get it, and they're acknowledging and celebrating him and the people around him. And I think that's really powerful.
Well, and you mentioned in school, because everybody's still kind of learning in school what all of us learned, even when I was younger. It's just one thing, 1963, I Have a Dream.
That's it. That 1963 and the bus boycott when Rosa Parks said, nah.
Yeah. And so if you study the later King, you do get the radical version, don't you?
You get the radical version. You get the complete holistic version, that he was an organizer, that he was for the marching and the protesting, that he actually didn't have beef that bad with Malcolm X, that he had a bunch of folks that he was working with, right? And so we get that entire story. We hear the story about his wife, his family, where he served, what work he did before he became Dr. King as we know him now. And it's really important history for all of our young folks to know.
Well, and you mentioned the women, one of whom, of course, was Coretta Scott King, another Rosa Parks. And you mentioned Bayard Rustin. And, you know, a lot of us know about Bayard Rustin. I was showing Brittany a picture of him, and we were at the museum on yesterday. But in your own words, for those who don't know, who was Bayard Rustin, and why is it important that we understand what he was doing?
Absolutely. So if you think about the Million Man March that took place, and we see all these pictures where you say, I'm a man, or Million Man March, and it was in Washington, D.C. Right. We think about that moment and who helped organize that it took dozens of organizers to pull that together, obviously, but that he was one of the key, I think of him, and help folks understand his connection to this work and the movement and his entrance to it. He was one of the people who co-organized that march.
That's right. And he was a gay man.
Yep.
And, of course, at that time, closeted was really the only way to be. Dr. King was threatened with exposure. They were going to expose that Bayard Rustin was gay. There were even those who were going to, and, you know, J. Edgar Hoover had his hand in all of this. There were even those who were going to project that Dr. King and Bayard Rustin had some kind of relationship. Yeah. I heard somebody yesterday, well, we want to talk about a relationship. I say, to hear y'all tell it, Dr. King was involved with everybody and anybody, so it's just too many. We can't deal with all that. But when he was threatened with being exposed, the plan was to get Dr. King to get rid of him. Yeah. And he wouldn't. He kept him by his side, and, of course, he played a very instrumental role. And then there are the scores of women, many of whose names we don't know.
Really quickly, I just wanted to Bayard Rustin. So when we think about that work and we think about the intersectionalities of how we do this movement work, and not only when it comes to faith and practice, but also when it comes to sexual orientation, gender, poverty, race, etc., class, wherever you're from, immigrant status, all of those things have to intertwine. And the fact that he had folks around him like that, which I believe in my heart that Jesus would have people around him like that too. We have to figure, and he did. How do we have folks around that to be able to do this work? And how does that inspire or remind us today to continue to keep up that legacy where we make sure that everybody's issues are at the forefront of the table and that everyone can participate with their talents to do the really important work.
And what you're saying, too, is that Dr. King was practicing intersectionality before it was even a word. That's a term.
We said it as a progressive word, before it was in the dictionary.
And then, of course, you know, we know the women that were close. Some names we know, but they still don't get lifted up enough. Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, and others. And then there were women whose names who aren't as well known, who were a critical part of the movement.
Yeah, we talked about folks in figuring out how Rusty Taylor, who passed away not too long ago, and we think about the stories that get silenced, and for traditional reasons, for cultural reasons, and just historic bypass. Folks just tend to ignore Black women. I think about the story of Fannie Lou Hamer and all that she went through. I actually said to myself, it was her birthday not too long ago, and I said, I'm going to sit down and research and just find out everything. Because I had about 30 minutes. And I looked up so much that I did not know about Fannie Lou Hamer that's not written. I found out why she didn't have any kids, because she had an involuntary hysterectomy. I found out that she was beaten in jail. I found out that she was registering people to vote. I found out why we came around that moment with her testimony at the DNC, and how the president interrupted her with a silly announcement. Like, if we just do that work and do that unpacking research. Last night when we were at Kojic Church and we were talking about our Hyundai celebration, I mentioned that work to the young folks. I said, listen, sometimes they're not going to tell you your history. It's our job to look it up.
Right, and to find out about it. How old were you when you became conscious of Dr. King and his work? Do you
Oh,
remember?
Dr. King?
Yeah.
Lord. When I became conscious,
Yes.
I was 15 or 16. Dr. King had to be before that. I probably had to learn who Dr. King was in middle school. And celebrating, because we have Dr. King celebrations, a holiday where we don't have to go to school, so we have to figure out who he is. And there were two, political figures, Dr. King and also Rosa Parks, that we knew aren't their names. We might not have known their entire story. I didn't know that Rosa Parks was a lawyer who did women's advocacy work around women's reproductive rights and et cetera, and was then the lawyer for Bessie Taylor. I didn't think about those things, but and we didn't know them. But those are my two folks, and I think I learned that in middle school.
So, and at that time, though, did you really get the gravity
No.
of who he was?
No. I grew up in Los Angeles. So my analysis I had a strong analysis of poverty and wealth before I had a strong analysis of race. My parents, who were union members and were union organizers, grew up, and my mom, my father is a special effects and construction worker before he retired. And when my mom and dad split, my mom was a single mother with 3 kids and transitioned into welfare. So my reality in Los Angeles, which is really full of people of color all over the place, full of immigrants, full of everything, that became my reality first. When I got to college and I was running for student body president of the entire campus at UC Santa Cruz, there were 18,000 students. Less than 300 of us were African American. Wow. Someone hung a noose on my door while I was lobbying to stop tuition increases in Sacramento. That's when I became racially active.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. That's something. And another bit of history that maybe as we go on, you can help educate the public about. Dr. King came to L.A. during the riots, and he wasn't. A lot of times people saw him as being chastising, but he actually wasn't. He was very supportive, talked about riots being the voice of the unheard. He understood that. And in his own thinking, began to talk about integrating into a burning house, how the dream was, in fact, turning into a nightmare.
Right. He wasn't downplaying different tactics that folks used when they wanted to get involved, right? I saw LA 92. Yeah. Phenomenal documentary that I saw. And I said to myself, if we hear the stories and see it from the perspective of the people who are impacted, like Dr. King did, then we'll have a very different conversation about what we see in the media and what we see when folks have uprisings. I think about the King riots, and then I think about what happened after Michael Brown and the uprisings that took place across the country, and that map that you saw that had all of the uprisings across the East Coast, the West Coast, and the South. And I said, now, if Dr. King were here, he would still be in support of that. He wouldn't say that's the only answer and solution, but he would not downplay or shut that down.
Yeah, no. How do you feel about being here in Memphis, and particularly in this space? I mean, this is a very historic space we're in right now.
I arrived yesterday and I drove past the Lorraine Hotel, and I didn't know. I'm from LA. I was in Nashville not too long ago. So things, I get it and I know the names of it. Seeing it in person, I passed the Lorraine Hotel and I got chills while I was driving and almost had to pull over. And walking into this space and looking at this room, I'm replaying in my head the YouTube videos that I see of his last speech at that pulpit. And now I'm in the actual space, and there is a very strong, beautiful, incredible ancestral spirit that is that deserves to be celebrated, and that I don't feel heavy or depressed. I feel empowered, and I feel almost kind of chosen. I'm like, out of all the people that could be here, I'm here right now in this moment 50 years later. It's incredible.
Yeah. It almost does feel like an anointing to be able to be here, and because he was anointed. Yeah. So, it's kind of hard for that not to spread around. Lastly, we lost a great Shiro on yesterday, Winnie Mandela. A word or two about her.
When we think about the apartheid in South Africa, we have to include her name. Yeah. And when we think about revolution and we think about freedom for black folks across the globe, not just in South Africa, we have to remember her name. And the stories that we hear of women who do really strong, powerful, incredible work, she is one of our heroes, like you said. And I'm praying and sending love to her family and those loved ones that were around her. It's a loss for us, but it's a gain for heaven.
Well, you know, like Derek was saying earlier, you know, there's always been tension in the movement. And I mean, it's human. We're all human beings.
There's still tension.
There's still tension moving. And
What you talking about?
and so some people, you know, Nelson and Winnie were divorced, and it was controversial. But that's life. People get divorced. All of our parents split, you know, and but it cannot be. Yeah, all of them do. Everybody on the side of my whose parents ain't split at some point or get back together and split again. But the thing is, she kept the anti-apartheid movement alive when he was in prison.
Yep. 27 years.
And they made him change the words of the song. We also lost Hugh Masekela recently. And when we used to sing the song was Bring Back Nelson Mandela, Bring Him Back Home. I want to see him walking down the streets with Winnie Mandela. And that's what everybody was sing. And then they got divorced and he didn't sing that part anymore. but no, we want to lift up our sister. I should also mention, again, it's a lot of history. Is so much we don't know. But Dr. King went to the UN to speak to the Special Committee on Apartheid. I believe it was in 1964. So even in 1964, he was raising his voice about apartheid. You can Google it, folks. You can see it for yourselves. He had gone to Africa as early as 1957 under the special invitation of Kwame Nkrumah for Ghana's independence from Great Britain. So he was a Pan-Africanist in that sense, and yet still found the grace and humility to say some garbage workers are important.
Yeah, there's reference of Nelson Mandela all over the world, and there's a beautiful. It's on my Instagram. There's a beautiful, almost I think 20-foot tall statue of Nelson Mandela in Palestine. And when I saw that statue, I said, "Oh my goodness!" Ran to it. It was really hot because it's made of steel, but I gave it a really big hug and took a picture with it. It's on my Instagram. We think about his reference across the entire globe and the work that he's done to free people across this country, and it's absolutely incredibly important for young folks to be able to learn that education, to learn that knowledge, and not just because we need to reverence the people, right? But because we need to understand what they went through and the tactics that they took, the organizing that they had, the shortfalls that they had, and then also the mess ups that they did in the strategy and organizing so we could pick up where they left off and we don't have to do it over.
Do you have any particular mission or goals that you want to achieve as a new youth and college director for NAACP?
Do I have any, or how many do I have?
What's some of your top ones?
Absolutely. So our young folks across the country have expressed to me that there is a very strong urge for grassroots organizing electoral action training. When I got involved as a young person, my people said, in order for you to be a great leader, you have to be able to help other people and give them tools and organize them through their talents to get work done, right? You have to be able to connect people's talents to the actual issues in democracy and help them see that they as an individual can make change in power. That's my role as a director. My job is to make sure that these people are equipped with the tools that they need so that at the local level, on their campuses and in their community, they can do what they want to do, but they can know how to do it. So that's one of my strongest goals, at least for now in the short term, and being able to find other people that we can populate the progressive movement. And I'm very, very intentional about that. When we talk about training grounds, we are one of the only membership-based organizations that has the largest contingent of young people and youth that are members to the organization. And so when I think about accountability, that's where my role comes in. But then I think about, well, what gift can I give the progressive movement from the NAACP? And it's our talented young people. So I want them to get the union jobs. I want them to get the organizing jobs at Planned Parenthood and at Think Progress and Center for American Progress. I want them to work at Advancement Project. I want them to work for BYP. These are my young folks that we're going to funnel. And people are always asking, where are the young people? I got 700 units worth, but we got to figure out how we place them in these positions so that they can use their talents to be able to get the work done and then change the world, obviously.
And you are, and that's a profound point. Lastly, do we have any update on Howard University? Are the students still in the administration building? Have you been in touch or anything?
I have, and they actually asked me to come down for next week, so I'll be there and I'll give you the information. Yes, they are still in the administration building. There was an interview that Roland Martin, our buddy, did with the student who was accused and with the president there. And so they're still working through the legalities of that case and what's going on. But I mean, let me say this. I am proud of those students. I'm very, very proud of those students. They have done a phenomenal job of making sure the messaging of what they care about and what they want to happen is they're taking control of their own issue and their own narrative. But what happened there was,
Yeah, no,
bogus.
yeah, you're right. No, clearly, that's totally out of control, and it's fundamental. I mean, it just can't happen. It's totally unacceptable.
Absolutely.
How can people listening get their young people involved in NAACP? Young people listening, how can they reach you? How can they get involved? What do you want them to do?
For sure. What do I want? Okay, so there's a lot. So how they can get involved? How they can reach me? They can go to NAACP Youth in College, and they don't have to try to go for a website. If you Google NAACP Youth in College, you will find the website. I want folks to join their local branches. If we're going to really build power, and really build at the local level, they have to be a part of an organization. And a lot of our folks aren't a part of organizations that say they want to do work and get involved as an activist. So I'm just asking you to join the organization, show up to the meeting, voice your concerns and your opinions about what the community is going through, and then take lead in figuring out how you solve that problem, right? So I want them to be able to join that. It is $10 for young people. So don't tell for the year. $10 for the year is nothing. So you can join for $10 for the entire year as a young person and be able to go and show up to your local unit or your local branch. That's what I want them to do. How they can find me, they can go to NAACP Youth in College in Google. They can find me on Twitter at my name. It's just Tiffany D. Lofton. That's also my email. It's tlofton@naacpnet.org. And then what I want people to do, I really want people to focus on, if you could change one thing, or if you can end one thing in this country, what would it be?
Okay.
And then do that.
Yeah.
Focus on doing that. And that includes voting, that includes turning up, that includes marching, that includes taking to social media, that includes holding people accountable. Sometimes it includes resisting, which I have, funny feelings about, but it includes all of those things. I want people to solve it and to end it. This world needs to change immediately.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Folks, they're doing great things. And social media is lit. She's got it rolling. What's the Twitter handle again?
It's Tiffany D. Lofton. It's at Instagram and Twitter. Tiffany D. Lofton.
NAACP Twitter. Is it
NAACP Now and NAACP.
And it's also on Instagram, NAACP.
The same thing. NAACP Now, NANOW, and then NAACP.
All right. So, no, that's really doing great things. And we've, a lot of people really are happy that you're here, happy for you, and inspired.
Tell my boss that.
I see him. How we doing, boss? We good?
Tell my boss that I'm doing a good job.
Yeah. All right. He was saying I don't know why he didn't just appoint himself youth and college director. He's so young, but
he's qualified.
Yeah, that's right. No, and we appreciate Derek coming. We appreciate Tiffany being here.
Thank you.
Derek's on with me every week. You are welcome to come on anytime.
You got my girl Jamira over there. I had to show her some love.
That's right.
Jamira's had me on it too.
That's right.
I love Jamira. Hey, Jamira.
And Jamira sits in for me often, folks. So please get involved. Text NAACP to say it.
Wait, why did I just blank?
46409. We're gonna lock that in, y'all. Okay. We're gonna tweet and reach 46409, folks. And again, we're live here at the Mason Temple, Church of God in Christ, and we are going to take a quick break. We will be back. Here, sanitation workers panels come. Thank you, Tiffany.
First of all, thank you for covering all of this work and doing all the work for Black people, because our media and our stories are not always told. So I want to appreciate you and thank you for being in this place so early in the morning to get all these phenomenal leaders together. I know we're running short on time, but you're doing the work of the Lord, and we thank you for making sure that our voices are documented.
Thank you, Tiffany. God bless you. Thank you for that. Folks, we're still streaming Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Make it plain. We're going to take a quick break off the radio. We'll be right back. Sirius XM Progress live in Memphis. This is MIP. All right, folks, those of you watching our stream, we're going to end our stream now. We'll come back a little bit later this morning, and we're going to be talking directly with some of the sanitation workers. If you want to hear the panel with the sanitation workers, you have to listen on the radio. Sirius XM Progress 127. Turn on your radios now so you can pick it up. It's going to be starting in about a half an hour or so. I'll be speaking with Angelique back in studio. We'll check in with Brittany. So we'll still be here at Mason Temple in Memphis, but we just won't be streaming the video. We'll resume that a little bit later on, probably in a couple of hours or so. But we thank you for joining us on the video. Share it, tweet it. Let everybody see it in this very historic place. All right, join us on the radio right now, Sirius XM Progress 127. Thank you.